Hello, and in today's video I want to go over design issues I have with Dead by Daylight. Now some of these issues people already know, and then there's some that are less apparent to people. I'm going to go through each problem on why it's a problem and maybe possible solutions. But before that, I'm going to go through how the game is currently intended to be played based on mechanics and information within the game. So currently there is two sides of this asymmetrical game. There is the killer side and there is the survivor side. The killer has to protect these generators from being completed and prevent the exit gates from opening. They do this by chasing survivors, hitting them and downing them, and putting them on hooks to sacrifice them to the entity. Their win condition currently is sacrificing survivors, and this generally goes from no kills to 1 kill, 2 kill, 3 kill and 4 kill. On the survivor side, it's the opposite. They need to not get killed and escape the trial. They do this by repairing 5 of the 7 generators, opening the exit gates, and then walking through the exit gate. The last survivor can also currently go through the hatch, which is kind of like a pity escape in most cases. Survivors can escape the killer by looping around obstacles within the trial, and they also have pallets and windows to vault through and even stun the killer. They also can bring objects into the trial, and there is some other interactables in the game, sometimes to do with a killer power. And that is the bare bone mechanics of the gameplay loop of killer and survivor. There's way more depth to the actual game, but I just wanted a bare bones overview of this so that we're all on the same page. So this brings me on to my list of design issues with the game. They're in no particular order, they're just ones that I thought of as I came up with. So the first design issue I have with Dead by Daylight is killers are encouraged to slug for the 4K. Now 4K means 4 kills, and slugged means knocking a survivor to the ground so they're in the crawling dying state, and then leaving them on the ground to go find someone else or slug someone else. I'll describe this common situation that happens during games, and I've noticed it a lot when I've been playing survivors. There's 2 survivors left. Maybe there's 1 or 2 gens left to do, and it's kind of clear that it's not going to happen. So it's basically pot luck on which survivor is found first. And the killer finds one of those survivors, chases them, knocks them down, then leaves them on the ground. Now, the design as intended would be the killer to hook that survivor, and then when that survivor is sacrificed, because let's face it, the other survivor is probably not going to rescue them, then that last survivor can go look for the hatch and try and escape. But because killers don't want to have to deal with the hatch and have 3 kills instead of 4 kills, they currently leave the survivor on the ground, and then they will start searching for the other survivor, whilst generally keeping a good idea where that survivor they've just knocked down is. They will then go find that other survivor, and it takes a long time for the survivor crawling around to actually die, so they have a fair amount of time to look. And more often than not, they go find that survivor, down them, put them on a hook, and then come back to the survivor they've knocked down, look for them. If the survivor's gone too far, they have to just bleed out or try and look for the hatch. And if not, the killer gets that final kill. Now, some of you might think, that's fine, the killer played well. And I get that part, I get it, but it's just not fun. It's not fun for the survivor. Why should they have to lie on the floor? It's an unengaging gameplay loop for the survivor, and quite frankly, I'm surprised this is still in the game. And ultimately, I do think it's a problem. It makes this game unfun in the end game, and also has that mentality where people are trying to not be the last one found, and discourages cooperative play from the survivors as well. I do also think from the killer's perspective, it's not very fun either. You have to down someone, and then you have to go look for someone who's hiding, and great, maybe you find them, maybe you hook them, and then they die. And then you've got to go looking around for the survivor that's probably going to look for the hatch, because why wouldn't you? Or you could have a survivor like me who crawls somewhere to not be found, just out of spite. In either situation, it's not fun for anyone. Not really. And all because people want a 4 instead of a 3. Now, there's a couple of potential solutions for this problem. One of them being at the last 2. If the game recognises it's a last 2 situation, maybe after a little while let that survivor get up. That also though may have problems, so may not be the best solution. Another solution though would be to de-emphasize the emphasis on kills for the killer, which I know sounds silly, but this mindset of having to have 4 kills for a win condition is not the best. We could encourage killers to be fine with 3 kills and if the survivor gets the hatch, maybe that counts as a kill for the killer as well, because they had to do that last desperate attempt to escape. Maybe keep that as a pity escape, so the survivor gets some blood points for the escape, but it still counts as a kill for the killer because the survivor was forced to look for the hatch instead of go through the exit gates. Make the exit gates the actual win condition for survivors is basically what I'm saying. I do think though we might be at a point where it's impossible to decouple kills from the win, but it might help. The next design issue I have with Dead by Daylight is under a similar vein. An emerging problem with Dead by Daylight is killers are opting to slug survivors instead of hooking. The reason for this is because survivors have so many perks that activate when they are unhooked or unhook, and they also get benefits for being unhooked, and this can be quite detrimental to the killer. The solution to this would have to be a number of things. First, reward killers for hooking. Now, at PTB last year, they had a system for this to go along with the anti-tunnel, anti-camp and anti-slug measures. Now, some of those measures were extreme, so it was good that they were taken back, but they did have some nice things where the killers were rewarded for hooking, and that was part of the anti-slugging measure, I believe. So reward killers for hooking. Maybe you can have it as a buff, like maybe some haste. I think that was one of them during that PTB. Or maybe it can be a reward based on the actual killer themselves. A good example of this is Jason. Jason is rewarded for hooking by getting a hook spear. Make that for every killer. For example, you could have Deathslinger automatically reload his gun when he's hooked someone. The first upside down travel could be recharged instantly, so that they can go and find another survivor. Maybe Wraith could be put back into Cloak so that they can go and find a survivor quicker. There's all these little things that they could do that they haven't yet, and it's bewildering to me. And you could probably tie this into anti-tunneling as well. Not that I think tunneling is the biggest problem, because survivors do have the tools to deal with tunneling. They just often don't, and that's not necessarily their fault. I think it's the developer's fault for not teaching people how to play their game. The next design issue I have with this game is perks are all over the place, and better perks come out, making older perks redundant. One of the best examples of this are these two perks. Clairvoyance from Michaela Reed. This allows you, when you've blessed or cleansed a totem, when you're not holding an item, you can use the use button, and for up to 12 seconds within 64 meters of you, you can see the auras of chests, exit switches, generators, hatches and hooks. This is already quite a niche perk and has quite a few annoyances that makes it not that usable for various survivors, because most people bring in an item of some sort, and not many people are blessing or cleansing totems. When they do, fair enough, but yeah. This perk is made redundant, in my opinion, by the perk Extrasensory Perception, and this is a perk from 11, and this was added in 2026. This perk has no real setup. All you have to do is crouch for 4 seconds. You can even be moving whilst crouched as well, and you see auras in an expanding radius up to 44 meters, although this can be increased with another perk. But you see auras in the expanding radius of everything: killers, survivors, totems, chests, and anything on the map that has an aura, you can see it. You also gain elusive, which is a very powerful buff. However, it's for the duration. You also gain oblivious. However, considering you can see the auras of everything around you, you can probably see the killer's aura, so it's not that big of a nerf to yourself. And this also lasts for up to 11 seconds or when you stop crouching, and then there is a cooldown of 40 seconds. So other than the little bit of time it takes to spin up, there's not really that much downside compared to Michaela's, other than the distance is slightly less. Clairvoyance feels like a redundant perk because of it, and there's so many perks like that. There's so many perks, there's so much bloat, and there's also 3 versions of every perk. So this is the problem. There's many perks that are kind of redundant now, and there's various versions of them, and in some cases, because the license is expiring, there's 2 versions of a perk as well, so that's even more confusing. Now, the solution to this, in my opinion, is one that Behaviour won't do, because it will affect their bottom line. But the solution would be decoupling perks from chapters, characters and killers, and either change perks with the lesser abilities, for example clairvoyance, change them to work differently or be more niche or something, or remove them entirely, because if you've decoupled a chapter then you won't need those free perks for every character. I also think they should remove the tiers of perks as well, just to simplify things even more. And because of licensing changing, you won't need to change the name of perks as well. This overall would make the whole game a lot easier. There'll potentially be less perks to deal with, there'll be more variety, there won't be 3 different perks that do the same thing in different various ways, like activate it this way or stand still and get it for free, or so on and so forth. However, due to it being sold with chapters, I don't think behaviour will do this. I think there is a sizable portion, me included, who buys chapters mainly to have the unlockable perks, and I don't think they'll want to affect their bottom line with that, even though in the long run this will be a healthier change to the game. Whilst we're on the topic of perks, there is another perk complaint I have. There is perks like Lightborn and Dissolution that should just be changed or removed from the game. Now, that might be a hot take, but there is a reason behind it. I'll go over Lightborn first. Lightborn as a perk essentially locks survivors out of a gameplay element. Now, whilst flashlights can be annoying, it is a part of the game. The killer should not be able to lock the survivors out of a gameplay option just because they don't like it. There is nothing on the other side, as far as I'm aware, that this can happen. The closest two I can think of would be sabotaging hooks, but usually there is hooks in the other area, and that is another thing I think should be removed as well, is hook distance offerings. They should just be removed. It's totally unfair. So I don't think killers should be running a perk to essentially lock survivors out of a gameplay element. Most people run this perk because they lack the skill to deal with it, and there is ways to deal with it without having to use Lightborn. First, based on positioning, face walls, face objects, reduce that chance. If you know someone's behind you, injure them and then go pick them up. It's not that hard. Usually by the time they get to the front, they don't have enough time. There is also other perks that can help. For example, my favourite is Forever Entwined, that allows you to pick up survivors quicker. That throws people's timings off. Even without that perk, I can still deal with them. Another perk is Franklin's Demise. There's so many options to deal with flashlights. It's a skill issue, to be honest. I don't think people should be running Lightborn, because it is essentially like running stabilizers on a bike. It doesn't solve the problem. They're not that hard to deal with. You're honestly too scared, and you're locking survivors out of their gameplay chance. Even with Forever Entwined, on occasion people do manage to get flashlight stuff, and that's fair. They've earned that skill. They've earned that. Why are we locking a player base out of using their item? I mean, especially since they paid blood points for that item to bring into the trial. And yes, sometimes they can leave without it, but it's just an unfair counter. It literally takes flashlights out of the equation. And even worse, when they blind you, it also gives you the aura of the person that's blinded you. So on top of denying a whole ability, it also gives you an aura for a ridiculous amount of time, so then that you can go after them and kill them. It's just an unfair mechanic. It takes away from survivor skill expression, and we as killers complain when our skill expression is taken away from. So why are we allowing it for survivors? It's double standards. Another perk that this is a kind of problem with is a perk like Dissolution as well. I think the activation is a bit too easy for that. Whilst there is a delay, still a bit bad, just demolishing pallets. If it is to stay in the game, I think it should be more on the part with something like Spirit Fury, where you have to set it up and then you get the benefit. But if this perk is changed, you would also have to change a killer like Krasu. Currently, the biggest problem with Krasu is her vault speed over pallets and stuff is very slow, and if you want to break the pallet, you have to go back into your body form, which takes time. Then you have to kick the pallet, which takes time. Then you'll need to go back into your head form because you're in a head form for a reason. Or you can go over and do a slow vault, but then the survivor makes too much distance, and then we'll use the pallet again, and it's too much. It needs change. The vault speed needs to be on par with like Legions, or allow Krasu to break pallets in head form. I don't know why the vault is a thing over pallets. I don't know why. Design wise, it makes little sense to me. On the survivor side, the only thing that can be comparable is shoulder the burden, and we hear people complain about that all the time, and yes, that should be changed as well. I don't think there's nothing on the killer side that can affect states like that. so survivors shouldn't have that either. Just a simple one, that one. It is an unhealthy part of the game. Moving on from perks, another design issue I have with this game is, say your team doesn't manage to complete all the generators and you're the last one there, so you go look for a hatch, you don't find it in time, the killer closes it. Why is it that then the survivor can go to one of the 2 gates and open them? You've not earned the ability to open the gates because you've not powered them. Why is it when the hatch is closed and the generators have not been done, why does the survivor then have the ability to open the gates? What was the point in powering up the generators if all it took was killing off your teammates? Why not just start stabbing your teammates and then getting out that way? Like, I don't understand why the last survivor gets so much preferential treatment. I get the hatch, it's that 50-50. I'm fine with the hatch. The hatch can stay. The hatch used to be horrible with people bringing in keys to open it, but I'm fine with the hatch now. What I'm not fine with is if the gates have not been powered, why does the survivor have the ability to open the gate? If the hatch is closed and the generators are not done, that survivor should just instantly be killed. It's simple as. I don't understand from a game design perspective why the survivor gets a second chance at escape. It infuriates me. So obviously if the gates have not been powered and the hatch is closed, that survivor should be instantly claimed by the entity. It's only fair. Now, sticking with the end game, the next thing that I think needs to be looked at the very least is end game builds on the killer side. Some of these are okay, but some of them have become very nasty. I saw one person in RPD block one of the exit gates and make the other gate near impossible to open, and it was basically a no-win condition. The survivors did all this work and they had no choice, no chance of escape, and I think that's unfair. And this is coming from a killer main. I don't think the end game should be impossible to escape. If you manage to power up the gates, I don't think the survivors should be punished because a killer brought 4 end game perks to guarantee 4k with silly tactics. I think with the game in its current position, there's not enough education to combat that, and some of these require exploiting the teamwork of the survivor. And some of these require tactics like slugging a survivor and then hooking them halfway through so that the gates are blocked and then there's no escape for any survivor. I just don't think it's fair. I think they need to be seriously looked at. I think the majority of the game, the strategy should be played during the match. And then the end game is just a last scramble for maybe getting a kill or 2, maybe getting more escapes. It's just a time pressure for that sort of thing. I don't think we should be having these unhealthy gimmicky endgame builds where survivors are punished for playing the game and getting to the end game and then finding a strategy that more or less kills them unless they know the specific set of circumstances that'll get them out. Because on a lot of these endgame builds, you either have to leave someone behind when you're encouraged to be a team, or maybe the obsession is the only one able to open the gate and they've been tunneled out and you didn't realize that during the game. There's just all these little gimmicky things, and I just don't think it's healthy for the game. I think it punishes survivors who are trying to play the game normally and are punished for either altruism or not knowing the specifics of these perks, because the game has a very high knowledge ceiling, and I don't think we need to make that worse with this style of game, which is quite underhanded. Quite frankly, I don't think the entity would approve. The solution to this may be making the endgame collapse take even longer when certain perks are in play, so that you can't just wait till the time is halfway through and then have Blood Warden make it impossible to escape, for example. Maybe when Blood Warden is active, the timer for the endgame collapse is paused. That would be a good compromise in my opinion, because the whole point of Blood Warden is to get some downs before they escape. Other ones may be the Obsession perk where they can open the gate normal or faster, whilst everyone else can only open it slow. Maybe that needs to be changed. I don't think it's healthy to have survivors do all this work and then have it taken away from them like that. They shouldn't be doing everything right and then get punished because someone brought a ridiculous build at the end. Now, from a killer problem to a survivor problem. The weaponizing of defensive measures in this game is ridiculous. Now, the devs do appear to actually have this on their radar and are doing nerfs to change this. but we'll have to see if this does anything. Currently, the problem is you hook someone as the killer, then they get rescued, and then you go chase someone else. Maybe you can't find anyone, so you go back to the hook where someone's just unhooked to intend to chase the unhooker with no intention to tunnel the unhookee. So you go chase the unhooker, and then the unhookee gets in the way, and because they have endurance, you swing and they get in the way and they take the hit and they don't lose a health state. They get put into deep wound, which is nothing really, and then they get a speed boost. They can run away. You get slowed down because you're cleaning your blade in typical killer fashion, and then the person you was chasing runs away. Now you can chase the person that's just made distance. Both these people have just made distance from you. You can chase the person that's healthy, not very smart anymore. You can go chase the person you just hit, but of course this person is also running the decisive strike, so you chase that person because now it makes more sense. You knock them down, pick them up, and then they use decisive strike on you, and then they get even more distance, and it just feels like they're weaponizing things that were designed to stop people targeting them off the hook. But because they know they're so safe, they throw themselves in your path so that you have to hit them. And then when it makes sense to chase them, because they clearly don't want safety, they want to weaponize their stuff against you. So you chase them, and then you hook them after that, because let's face it, half these people don't know how to weaponize their stuff. It is primarily just annoying, and yeah, it's antithetical to a horror game where the survivors should be running in fear from the killer, but instead they're throwing themselves into your path when they should be at their most vulnerable. Like, I get altruism, taking protection hits and stuff, I'm fine with that part. It's the people who throw themselves at you knowing that they have an extra health state and DS and any other anti-tunnel perks that make it even harder for you. And there's an argument that yes, they're just playing the game, but also these mechanics were given to survivors because they kept complaining that killers would tunnel them off the hook, and now that they have these tools, they use these tools to throw themselves in front of the killer. And then sometimes they even complain that, oh, you tunneled me, when you literally threw yourself in front of us just so we would lose track of the other survivor who by rightly was taking the heat from you. And then you became the more lucrative target when you threw yourself in, we get hit, and then it's like, well, we may as well chase you down now because you're closer now and injured and potentially would be on death hook. So we chase you down, we throw you on the hook, and maybe you have to eat a DS, and then you complain in endgame chat and give us abuse for your mistake. I think the path that the developers are taking currently are reducing the endurance and giving the survivors elusive, and I think that is a good idea. Whilst I think elusive is quite powerful, elusive was originally intended to be an off the hook perk, and I think that's where it should be. And if they can tune down the endurance to a reasonable part, and then maybe give more elusive just to let them get away from the hook and heal, and then in tutorials train people to not heal under the hook, go run far away, go heal, reset, and then maybe we can get to a healthier part where survivors are not just throwing themselves in front of the killer to protect someone who's already healthy. And maybe we can have a game that's, intended to be scary and horror-like again, instead of this silly game where people throw themselves at you and just ruin the killer's, intended target. So then you have to chase them, and then you're, quote, a tunneler, unquote. It's just something that's really been frustrating me recently. But hopefully the path the developers are taking currently is a good right step. For a side note as well, what I would personally do is when you actually hit someone with endurance, there's this white kind of overshield around them. I think that should be present from the moment you get endurance, and then the killer can know not to hit you and not to bother with you. I think that should be shown to the killer so that the killer knows, I don't want to bother with you, not surprised, don't want to tangle with you, because it should be a defensive perk. It shouldn't be used offensively. So yeah, that's kind of my issue with this, weaponizing defensive measures against the killer for just playing the game. Moving on to a similar vein is the game lacks tutorials and education. Whilst there is this little tutorial within the game, it teaches bad habits and just isn't that helpful for teaching people. I think the developers need to make a way better tutorial system and education. Now there is more education tools coming within the game, so I applaud that. It goes over every killer and all their powers and how to play as them as well as counter them, and that's good. That's really good. But the game also needs to teach survivors specifically the fundamentals of the game, such as looping, vaulting, dropping pallets, generators, endgame stuff, that sort of stuff. All the basics, and I don't think currently the tutorials do a good enough job. It's very subpar. So ultimately, it's no wonder that the player base is quite ignorant of many systems in the game. Hopefully with the killer video things that are going to be in game, that's going to help. However, a lot of the base stuff still needs to be sorted out. For example, I wonder how many survivors don't fully understand that there is 3 different vault animations based on how you approach a window. I wonder if that's a source of confusion to survivors early on. Like, oh no, why do sometimes when I'm running at a window, I jump over it fast, but then sometimes I'm doing it very slow. It's like, that probably is very confusing to new players. So just more needs to be done. In a similar vein, MMR really needs to be tweaked. MMR keeps throwing new players with experienced players, and that must be so frustrating. The MMR system just needs to work better. Needs to put people of appropriate skill together, and on top of that, they need to stop. And with that in mind, the next thing is win conditions. Win conditions focus too much on kills and escapes. There are survivors and killers that don't win that play extremely well, and I think the game needs to take that into account. On top of that, I think at the very least, killer needs to not have so much focus on kills. As we were talking about earlier, killers are slugging for the 4K. If we can make a system where it rewards killers, no matter how many kills they get, if they've played well, essentially, if killers have played well, regardless if they only get 1 kill, maybe they still get rewarded in some way. Same with survivors. Survivors, sometimes I've played a game and I've played it really well, I've done the majority of the work, and then I get killed in the end game, and it feels really bad because that isn't recognised as a win for me. That's recognised as a loss, even though I have essentially got the rest of my team out with my labour. So I think that also needs to change on the survivor side. Kills and escapes needs to reflect the actual reality. If a killer gets 3 kills in a game, that should definitely count as a win. The only part I don't fully have an idea of is if the killer plays very well but still gets 4 out. Maybe hooks could count towards winning or a victory. I don't know. The killer part is harder, but rewarding killers more is a must in my opinion, because currently killers are feeling very low because we're constantly shat on by design, and this is why we have slugging currently at an epidemic. So many people are just slugging for the 4K, slugging survivors because they don't want to have to deal with random crap, and it's just very unhealthy for the game. So we need to kind of change that, and I think the victory conditions and MMR as well will help with that. Same as survivors. If I die but everyone else still gets out, I think that should count as a win for me as well. Maybe decoupling the win condition from one side winning and one side losing, and just have, if you reach this sort of threshold as a killer, you have won the trial on your end, and if survivors get out, they've won the trial on their end. I know that takes away from the competitiveness of it, but this game is so vicious right now, and I think we kind of need that, because half the time you're just called slurs in the end game because you've played to meet a threshold of, say, 4Ks in a horrible way. And I don't blame killers that much. I do to a point because you chose to do that gameplay method, but also I don't at the same time. But yeah, generally a whole restructuring of how MMR works and endgame is the way I'd go about this. Another issue I have with this game is essentially generators are boring. This is more from a survivor's perspective, but you go in, you repair 5 generators, and then you escape for a game. And I suppose it can be fun at times, but also it's the same boring trial every time. And this is supposed to be like a trial for survivors. Why is it the same trial every single time? Why can't we have more variation? We get them in special events like the blood generators in the Blood Moon event, and that's pretty cool. That's a bit different. You have to get a container full of blood, take it to a generator, and then pour it in. That is a little bit of difference, a little bit of variation. If it was up to me, I would start building more gameplay trials and not just have generators. This would require a lot of work with changing perks and various other aspects of the game, but you can adapt that stuff, I believe. I think we need to have more than just generators. I think maybe one trial is repair generators to open the exit gate. Maybe another trial could be find these pieces of a puzzle on the map and then take it to either main building or shack and assemble it. And then if you do that, it shows you where the hatch was, one of the hatches will spawn, and maybe you rinse and repeat for that. Maybe that could be an interesting dynamic. You build one map and then one person escapes. Then you build another map, then another person escapes. Maybe you could get all these pieces and place them at full podium and have one piece left, and then you can all escape together. Or maybe you just want one person to escape because that person is on death hook. That was just off the top of my head. And vice versa, this could also work for killer as well. Like, why do we need to hook? We already have another system in game with the cages. We could have hooks, we could have cages, we could just have killer survivors get downed, and that could also be potentially interesting as well. Maybe there's positives and negatives with each one. Maybe we could even have the killer choose which one they prefer, but that might have a ton of issues with abuse. So yeah, but yeah, there's tons of things we could try, and even the devs have shown us they're thinking of new trial ideas with the zombie mode. That zombie mode could be a mode that comes in. We get a random map, we get a random mode, and that's the trial. And it keeps things fresh, interesting. Yes, it will mean sometimes people DC, but people DC anyway for the most stupidest of things. And that's another thing that needs to change, which I'll talk about in a minute. Yeah, more variation in this game would be better. That's one of the things that makes this game so good, is the killer variation. But I'd also go further and have more variation overall, as in the tasks, on both sides. I guess the last issue I'm going to cover is the DC epidemic and killers being stuck in the end game. So currently, survivors can DC, and most of the time they don't even get a penalty. Survivors are currently giving up more and more, DCing at the first hit if they're found first, or when things don't go their way, they run to the killer and ask to be killed just so they can get out of the trial and go to the next game. And I think that needs to change. I think if you queue up for a trial, you have to play that trial out. And other people have had this idea as well. If you leave a game until that trial is over, you can't queue up. I think that's fair. There is some games that could last forever, and that might be an issue, but you can always figure out those problems. For example, I had a game with a Legion and it lasted forever. It lasted 35 minutes. It might even be in the video playing in the background, I don't know. But this game lasted for 35 minutes. The Legion kept making us bend, didn't kill us, and we were trapped in there for so long. So yes, there is issues like that, but you can fix those, you know. There's already, if a generator's not been touched for a long time, you can DC with that penalty, and you could always have that as well. That's fair. But the people who DC at the first inconvenience, that needs to be punished. If you leave before that allowing to DC thing, you should be punished for it. You should be not allowed to queue up until that game is played out. Maybe you don't even get to leave the game. Maybe you have to spectate. Or at the very least, you can't play until that game is over. It's enough said with that. The other issue is in the end game, killers are generally forced to hang around. And you're supposed to defend the gates and all that stuff, but sometimes there's just so many survivors left on the games that you've had that are really bad, and then they force you to come to the gates to push them out. They spam notifications so that you have to push them out so that they can teabag you, and yeah, it's not pleasant. I'm not sure the best solution for this. Some people have said when it's the end game, the killer could choose to leave. Maybe that's one idea. Another one could be if all the survivors are in the end game, in an end game set of gates, and the killer's not there for up to like 5 seconds, maybe they get automatically pushed out. I mean, if you're all at the end game gate, there's no point prolonging the damn thing. Some people will say, oh, but I like to get extra blood points. Just you're tomming the killer. Just leave. Forced to leave, I would say. I mean, some survivors would hang out at the exit gates, maybe, but then you can at least punch them and stuff. I mean, ultimately, this game is quite toxic at times, and the developers don't help when they make out killers are toxic, tunneling skull merchants, and yeah, it's a big problem. And I'm not 100% sure on the actual solution for this. Maybe a combination of the two that I said would be good, because ultimately people are being bullied because they're not able to compete with people, and part of that is because of MMR, and part of that is because of, again, how toxic this community can be to each other. There's this arms race to hurt each other, essentially. There's this arms race to hurt each other, and it's just not a fun game sometimes because of it. But yeah, that's currently all the design issues I have with this game. It's more of a top-down kind of approach to it, as in there's probably lots of little small things as well which I haven't covered, but these are the main things I think need to be sorted to make this game way better. I don't think even half of them will get sorted, but this is partly why I'm making the video, so that more people can be aware and understand design issues with Dead by Daylight. And quite frankly, as someone who has grown up wanting to make games and made a few here and there, I do question the developers of why some of these things are still in the game. Specifically, the slugging for 4K and the perks being all over the place. The endgame hatch thing is a big bugbear of mine. The weaponizing of defensive measures is quite infuriating, but it sounds like they're starting to deal with that. Hopefully they can sort MMR out at some point. Win conditions might be a good place to look into as well. Just changing the way people perceive victory in this game might reduce some of the toxicity. And then just variations with like gameplay. Like, you've designed this world of trials, and just trialing out new game modes. You already have some with things like 2v8, Lights Out, the Blood Moon event. You've also got some of these gameplay elements in mind. You could potentially trial them as alternate trials and see how they play and have some variation. It could make this game even more interesting when you have to adapt your tactics, your strategies, and add more variation and randomness. But yeah, hopefully this has helped you gain a bit of awareness of issues with Dead by Daylight. And if you agree or disagree with any of these, feel free to comment. And if you have any design issues with the game that I have not mentioned, feel free to let me know down below as well. And if you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more by me, give me a subscription. I've just reached 100 subscribers and would like to see more of you, as I would like to discuss more things and have it reach more people. And if you want to see another video from me, I have this ping system I designed for Dead by Daylight, which would help with the communication issue within game and help bridge the gap between people in voice calls and solo queue. So give that a look. Bye for now.